Intro. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when silence becomes the loudest sound in the room. When two people once intertwined by emotion, by laughter, by connection, stop reaching out. No texts, no calls, no messages left unread because there are none left to read. You both stop contacting each other. The line goes silent, and yet something is still happening. Deep beneath the stillness. Cornel West once said, "Love is what justice looks like in public." But what does love look like when silence replaces words? When distance becomes the new dialogue? This isn't just about love or loss. It's about what happens inside the soul when connection breaks. When two human beings, one dismissive, avoiding their own vulnerability, and the other waiting for warmth that never returns, finally stop chasing each other's shadow. In this journey, we will go beyond the psychology of attachment, into the very philosophy of the heart. We will ask not only what happens to them or to you, but what happens within you when silence becomes your teacher. So, take a deep breath. Let's begin. This is when a dismissive avoidant and you both stop contacting each other. This is what happens next, the weight of silence. When communication fades, the first thing that rises isn't peace, it's noise. The noise of your own thoughts, your own wondering, your own replay of every message, every tone, every moment that could have gone differently. The dismissive avoidant doesn't disappear out of cruelty. They retreat out of fear, fear of intimacy, fear of emotional dependency. Fear that love might expose the parts of themselves they cannot yet accept. Cornel West reminds us that to love is to learn to bear the burden of the other, but those who live behind emotional walls cannot bear even their own. Their silence is not power, it's protection, a defense built in childhood, maintained through adulthood, a fortress against rejection. When they stop contacting you, it's not always because they've stopped caring. It's often because caring feels unsafe. Vulnerability for them is like standing unarmed in a battlefield, so they choose the armor of detachment. And you, the one who feels, who reaches, who believes, are left standing in the ruins of unspoken words. You start to question your worth, your impact, your place in their heart. But here's the truth. Silence reveals what words could not. It shows who is willing to sit in the discomfort of distance, and who needs constant reassurance to feel whole. Cornel West teaches that you cannot be a lover if you are not a fighter. And right now, your fight is not for them, it's for yourself, for your peace, your clarity, your wholeness. When both of you stop contacting each other, a sacred test begins. Who will grow in the silence? Who will collapse in it? The dismissive avoidant seeks relief in escape. You must seek redemption in understanding. Their silence is not your punishment, it's their mirror. And in that mirror, you begin to see what you truly deserve. Someone who doesn't just answer your messages, but answers your soul. The emotional gravity shift. Time passes. Days turn into weeks. Weeks into quiet months. What felt unbearable begins to transform into something deeper. Awareness. At first, the silence felt like rejection, but now it begins to feel like revelation. You start to see that the absence of their voice is making room for your own. Cornel West often speaks about the courage to love in a loveless world. That courage begins when you stop waiting for validation from someone who fears connection. It begins when you recognize that distance can be medicine, painful but cleansing. The dismissive avoidant will eventually feel something too, though they might not admit it. Their emotional detachment is not immunity, it's delay. The heart they tried to hide behind walls will start to echo with your absence, not because they missed the attention, but because deep down they sense the loss of someone who saw through their armor. You see, Avoidance creates short-term comfort, but long-term loneliness. And when two avoidant, or one avoidant and one heart-led soul, stop reaching out, time begins to test the integrity of their peace. For you, this silence becomes transformation. You rediscover forgotten parts of yourself, the hobbies, the laughter, the stillness that doesn't hurt anymore. You begin to see that not all endings are failures. Some are invitations to rebuild yourself without waiting for someone else to notice. Cornel West says, "Never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. But in private, justice is self-respect. When you choose not to chase what runs from you, you are performing an act of emotional justice for your own soul. And while the dismissive avoidant may not reach out, you begin to feel something far more powerful than reconciliation. Freedom. Freedom from needing closure. Freedom from decoding mixed signals. Freedom from defining your worth through someone else's silence. Silence in this stage becomes your greatest ally. It turns confusion into clarity. It turns heartbreak into strength. As Cornel West would say, love is never cheap. It demands courage, endurance, and truth. Sometimes that truth is realizing that not everyone who touches your heart is meant to stay. And so, the silence between you becomes sacred ground, the space where you evolve beyond attachment, beyond fear, into peace. When the mind becomes the battlefield, the silence between you doesn't just exist outside, it starts echoing inside. You begin to think not only about what they did, but why you stayed, why you tried to reach the unreachable, heal the unready, love the unavailable. Cornel West once said, "You can't lead the people if you don't love the people. You can't save the people if you don't serve the people. But in love, serving someone who will not meet you halfway is not salvation, it's self-erasure." The dismissive avoidant mind operates in contradiction. They crave connection but fear the surrender it demands. They desire love but cannot bear the weight of its vulnerability. They tell themselves they're better off alone. But late at night, that solitude whispers truths they can't outrun. You, on the other hand, are living through the storm of memory. Every message left unsent, every conversation replayed, every what if becomes a soldier in the war of your thoughts. But remember, silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. Healing begins in the invisible. Growth begins in the unspoken. Cornel West teaches that the blues is about the catastrophic and the comic, the tragic and the transcendental, all at once. You are living your own blues. The sorrow of letting go and the quiet humor of realizing you survived what once felt unthinkable. In this battlefield of the mind, two things will try to rule you: regret and idealization. Regret will say, maybe I should have done more. Idealization will whisper, maybe they'll come back changed. But truth, pure, unromantic truth, speaks softly. They left not because you weren't enough, but because they weren't ready to love without fear. And so your mind becomes your teacher. It trains you in detachment, in clarity, in strength. The silence you once feared now sharpens your perception. You start to see not who they were, but who you became while waiting for them. When they begin to feel the distance, something fascinating happens when you stop chasing. The energy changes. Dismissive avoidants are not immune to emotion. They are delayed by it. They feel in echoes, not in real time. When you pull back, when your energy detaches, when your light no longer seeks their shadow ear, they begin to notice. Cornel West once said, "Love is always about concrete acts of tenderness and care." When those acts stop appearing, the avoidant begins to experience an unfamiliar silence. Not from you, but from themselves. For the first time, they must sit with their own emotional emptiness. They may scroll through old messages, revisit old memories, and wonder if the stillness they chose was worth the loneliness it brings. Their logic says, "I wanted space," but their heart quietly replies, "Then why does the space hurt so much?" You see, emotional distance is not freedom for them. It's exposure. Without your warmth, they confront the coldness they've always tried to hide behind control. They may reach out subtly, a like on an old post, a random message, a nostalgic comment, not to reconnect but to test the waters of your attention. This is where your lesson deepens. Because Cornel West reminds us, you can't have love without integrity. And integrity now means not going back to what broke you just because it's familiar. You have to understand, when you both stop contacting each other, it's not a standoff, it's a mirror. Each of you is being shown what you truly value. They value safety. You value sincerity. And life in its infinite wisdom will not allow these two to coexist without transformation. Their silence begins to ache. Your silence begins to heal. And in that reversal, the universe balances the scales. What once was one-sided begins to shift. Not through revenge, not through pride, but through peace. The emergence of power and peace. There's a moment, subtle yet powerful, when you wake up and realize you haven't thought of them all day. You sip your coffee, scroll your feed, walk outside, and the air feels lighter. The silence that once suffocated you now feels sacred. This is the moment Cornel West describes as the courage to be a hope in a time of despair. Because hope, at this stage, is no longer about reconciliation, it's about resurrection. You are not waiting for someone to come back. You are coming back to yourself. When both of you stopped contacting each other, the world didn't end, but an illusion did. The illusion that love means constant pursuit. The illusion that silence means rejection. The illusion that your worth depends on someone's attention. As you reclaim your emotional space, your energy changes. You start attracting peace instead of drama, stability instead of chaos, presence instead of promises. And that's when the dismissive avoidant begins to truly feel your absence. Because absence is not about distance, and it's about energy. They don't miss the texts. They miss the safety your presence once gave them. But now that safety has returned home, to you. Cornel West often speaks of love as a form of death and resurrection, dying to the ego, rising in compassion. You have died to the version of yourself that begged for crumbs, and now you are rising as someone who embodies fullness. Peace doesn't come from getting them back. It comes from understanding that even if they never return, you have already gained what they could not give. Self-respect, self-awareness, and spiritual freedom. You begin to understand that love, in its highest form, is not possession, it's presence. It's the willingness to let go when holding on means losing yourself. And so the silence between you no longer feels empty. It feels complete. It's not the sound of loss anymore. It's the sound of liberation. Cornel West would say, "The condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak." Your suffering spoke. It told you who you are, what you need, and how to rise. And from that truth, you build a new kind of strength. The quiet, unshakable strength of a soul that learned to love without losing itself. The return of awareness. There comes a time when silence does not just heal you. It awakens you. It sharpens your perception. It lets you see people not for who you wish they were, but for who they truly are. Cornel West once said, "You can't lead the people if you don't love the people. You can't save the people if you don't serve the people." In love, this means you cannot truly connect with someone if your only mission is to fix them. You can only love them when you allow them to face their own darkness. And so, as you continue in silence, something profound begins to happen. You start to see the patterns that once controlled you, the way you gave too much, apologized too quickly, accepted too little. You recognize that love without boundaries becomes self-sacrifice, not devotion. The dismissive avoidant, in their own quiet corner, begins to feel the cost of avoidance. Not because they suddenly change, but because emotional distance, once a comfort, becomes a curse. They look for distractions, for shallow connections, for anything that feels like freedom, but what they find instead is emptiness wearing a disguise. And as they drift through that void, the echo of your presence grows louder. Not your words, not your voice, but your absence. The kind of absence that teaches. The kind that whispers, she was peace. He was grounding. I was too afraid to stay. Cornel West often reminds us that to love is to learn how to die to your ego. When both of you stopped contacting each other, what truly began to die was not love. It was illusion. The illusion that control equals safety. The illusion that silence is strength. In the quiet, you've been reborn. You have discovered that closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you create by understanding yourself. You no longer need an apology to find peace. You've learned to forgive them not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. And in that freedom, awareness blooms. You start to look at relationships differently. You begin to realize that love is not about chasing chemistry. It's about building compatibility. Not about intensity, but about reciprocity. Cornel West calls this spiritual maturity. It's when love no longer feels like a battlefield, but a practice, a sacred discipline of truth and tenderness. And in that practice, you finally see, you were never too much for the wrong person. They were simply too afraid to meet you where love lives and in vulnerability. The transformation of silence. Silence, once your enemy, now becomes your sanctuary. You sit with it. You walk with it. You even smile at it. Because now it no longer represents loss. It represents wisdom. Cornel West teaches that we must be maladjusted to injustice. And in the language of love, this means refusing to normalize emotional neglect. You have become maladjusted to inconsistency, to confusion, to emotional distance. You no longer chase love that costs your peace. The dismissive avoidant may still watch you from afar, curious, confused, even regretful. But you have transcended the need for validation. You've learned that some stories end without closure, but not without meaning. Every unanswered text, every ignored call, every moment of silence, and they all carried a lesson. That your love was not wasted. It was simply misdirected. Now your energy begins to attract differently. People who value communication, souls who respect boundaries, hearts that aren't afraid to stay. Cornel West reminds us, you can't love without hope, and you can't hope without faith. And now your faith has shifted. From hoping someone will change to knowing that you can heal. From seeking love externally to becoming love internally. The silence has purified you. It has burned away your desperation, your illusions, your dependence on closure. What remains is the purest form of power, peace. You've learned to speak the language of detachment, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You no longer chase validation, you radiate self-assurance. You no longer wait to be chosen. You understand that you are already whole. And as your light grows stronger, something miraculous happens. You no longer see the dismissive avoidant as the villain. You see them as a teacher, a soul whose fear taught you the meaning of courage, whose silence taught you the value of your own voice. Cornel West once said, "Justice is what love looks like in public." Now you live that truth privately, by treating your own heart with fairness, patience, and care. You have become your own justice, your own peace, your own answer, the philosophy of letting go. So what happens when a dismissive avoidant and you both stop contacting each other? The world doesn't end, but the version of you that needed their attention does. You both face your reflections in silence. One hides, the other heals, and slowly the silence begins to speak truth. That love was never meant to chain you. It was meant to change you. That absence was never punishment, it was protection. That losing someone can sometimes mean finding yourself. Cornel West's philosophy reminds us that to love deeply is to suffer deeply, but to grow profoundly. And now you understand that growth doesn't always happen in togetherness. Sometimes it unfolds in solitude, in the quiet strength of walking away with grace. You've learned to honor your emotions without drowning in them, to love without losing your center, to release what was never fully yours without resentment. When you stop contacting each other, life gives you a mirror. You either use it to look back or to look within. You have chosen the latter. And as you walk forward, wiser, lighter, and freer, remember, the silence that once hurt you now guards you. The love that once broke you now builds you. And the ending that once shattered you became your beginning. Because in the words of Cornel West, love is not about possession. It's about the pursuit of the good, the beautiful, and the true. And in your journey through silence, you have found all three within yourself.